I'm glad to see that there is a general agreement among the committee members that we need to do something. That's the good news. The bad news is every once in a while when we all get along and we want to do something, we tend to overreach and we have unintended consequences, and that's why it's very important for us to understand going forward, how do we get this right? Mr. Stansel, you mentioned during the testimony or during your opening statement, did you say 90% of the, at least among your members, 90% of the work that goes into research doesn't produce a marketable drug?
That's right, and that's even products that make it to a clinical trial. So
Okay.
a product that goes into a clinical trial, 9 out of 10 don't make it.
And you also said that drug prices were averaging about 1.5% increases, at least prices from the pharmaceutical company?
That's right. The net prices over the last year, 1.5%.
So how does the math work? I think Senator Durbin put up I can understand, incidentally, why you don't put the price up, and I'm going to go to Mr. Olson to maybe have him expand on the discussion he had with Senator Feinstein. But one of the reasons you don't put the price up when you're advertising that as a pharmaceutical is you have no earthly idea what the ultimate price to the patient is going to be. Is that correct?
That's right.
No earthly idea whatsoever.
It could be zero or it could be the full price. You just don't know.
And a part of that is a distortion in what I call a value chain from the pharmaceutical company to the patient that we need to have added transparency in. You mentioned, Mr. Olson, in your interchange with Senator Feinstein about the pharmacy benefit managers and about the rebates. I mean, I think, Mr. Chair, I think it would be helpful if we actually had a hearing on what I consider to be the value chain from research all the way to taking the medicine so that our members have a better understanding of all these distortions in the system that would become very frustrating because you absolutely cannot know as an industry what the ultimate price is going to be. And if we only come to the industry and say lower your prices, I think that's a blunt force sort of object, a blunt object, rather than us going in on a very focused basis through the value chain to figure out how to reduce prices. So, Mr. Olson, when we talk about evergreening, when we talk about product hopping, and we talk about patent thickets, there's no question in my mind that there are some abuses. The concern that I have is if we just go too far, that we may sweep others up into it that are actually appropriately going about doing their business. Can you talk about some suggestions for how we could be more focused and more measured and what actions we would take as a Congress?
Yes, Senator, I agree that that it could be, we could go too far and have unintended consequences. I think it can be very difficult to say exactly what is behavior that is patent thickening versus what is behavior that is simply doing incremental innovation. And I also worry that if a thickening definition is decided here, even if it's limited to drugs, that would then try to be applied to other areas. For instance, high tech, you can have thousands, tens of thousands of patents that cover one product, yet people are able somehow to do licenses and produce innovation. So, Senator, I would suggest that the place to focus is to know that drug companies and all patent owners are going to use patents and use regulation to their advantage to try to maximize profits. And the traditional counterweight to that has been competition. So I think legislation that really focuses on allowing and facilitating competition from generics is the most beneficial, and that's why the product hopping, pay for delay, those sort of legislation that fix where we're having competition be denied through abusive use of the regulatory process is the way to go, versus trying to say, here are certain ways to use patents that we think are beneficial and promote the innovation we like. Slight variations on that might be bad, and trying to thread that needle. I'm not saying it can't be done, Senator, but I think it's very difficult.
Mr. Carey, briefly, and then I've got a final question.
So on product hopping, it's very important that Congress acts because sometimes courts get it wrong. With a soft switch, the drug company leaves the old drug on the market. That's complicated for courts. They say 2 is better than 1. That's wrong. Patent thickening, you could limit it to the biologic setting, put in a whole bunch of factors, give the FTC authority.
And I think providing clarity is what we do. The courts basically interpret. Sometimes they don't always get it right, the precedents and existing law, and that's why we have our jobs. The last thing has to do with international reference. But one thing we have to understand as a jurisdiction, the cost of providing a drug in the United States will almost always certainly be higher than other countries because of the standards that we have here the legal system, the tort system, a number of other things that have the added cost for the jurisdiction that we're operating in. That's a reality. We should probably take a look at that and determine whether or not we can claw back some of that so that we're more competitive from the cost of doing business in a country. But I also think that many people right now want to take the easy way out and say, let's just go find an international reference price that has been done by basically a country mandating a certain price point and adopt that as our price point. I, for one, think if we use that simplistic approach to addressing a serious problem that we may need to make progress on, that you're going to see innovation dry up overnight. And at the end of the day, I don't really, the pharmaceutical company does pharmaceuticals do a lot of great work here. Research institutions do a lot of great work here. I appreciate them for their work. What I really care about are the individuals who need these medications and a fair price. And I know that Mr. Mitchell and people like him will not get the care that they need and will suffer if we have a legislative overreach and don't balance and have a full understanding of the implications of some of our policy decisions as we move forward with this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman.